name is Final Cobler, and this is my final for my Art 113 class. I will be discussing Claude Monet's Water Lily series and how the series changed over the course due to Monet's cataracts. To start, Impressionism was a radical art movement that began in the late 1800s, centered primarily around Parisian painters, and can be identified by relatively small, thin, yet visible brushstrokes, open composition, emphasis on accurate depiction of light and its changing qualities, which are often indicators of the passage of time, ordinary subject matter, unusual angles, and inclusion of movement as a crucial element of the human perception and experience. Impressionism in the 19th century art movement that originated with a group of Paris-based artists who independent expositions brought them to prominence during the 1870s and 1880s. Impressionists rebelled against classical subject matter and embraced modernity, desiring to create works that reflected the world in which they lived and faced harsh opposition from the conventional art community in France. Credited as one of the single greatest contributors and most well-known innovators of the Impressionist movement, Claude Monet spent his career mastering the art of capturing a fleeting moment with simple brushstrokes on canvas. In May of 1883, Claude Monet moved his family about 50 miles west of Paris to what would be their new home, Giverny. Spending the last 40 or so years of his life there, Monet spent his time gardening, and it was these gardens that inspired him to paint famous scenes such as his water lilies, of which he painted over 250 paintings. Impression became a part of the art world's vocabulary by the way of one of Monet's early paintings called Impression Sunrise, and the word Impressionism was first used in 1847 by a critic of Monet's early exhibitions. Explaining the technique to an artist friend, Monet explained the technique saying, "When you go out to paint, try to forget what objects you have before you, a tree, a house, a field, or whatever. Merely think, here is a little square of blue, here's an oblong pink, here is a streak of yellow, and paint it just as it looks to you, the exact color and shape, until it gives you your own naive impression of the scene before you." Monet enjoyed working in series, and by his practice of painting the same subject multiple times, he was able to capture small moments which exemplify what made Impressionist art so successful. In his early water lily works, there is typically no horizon, nothing to suggest scale, and Monet rarely included the pond's edge. By using a vantage point that looks directly down into the water, the two main principles of the painting are the reflections of the sky on the water and the lilies growing in the pond. One of the first paintings featuring water lilies, made with brushstrokes of various grades of precision and looseness, was made between 1897 and 1898, and it set the standard for the exploration of this motif. This particular what may be Monet's most recognizable pieces were made by the artist in 1899 when he started a series of 18 depictions of the wooden footbridge over the pond that summer. The paintings focused on Monet's pond, the bridge, water plants, and surrounding trees, with the composition divided by a fixed horizon. Monet's garden was unique and carefully tended to. He had developed this garden using imported water lilies from Japan and had special staff attending to the maintenance of the garden. He also had a small round bridge made from wood from his garden, crafted for the pond. In this series, he has painted the various parts of his garden in various lights and at different times during the day. The water lily series in greater depth, the paintings took on a more expansive scale. After an accident in 1901, which caused temporary loss of sight in one eye, Monet suffered increasingly from deterioration of his sight. The impact on his painting was in the steady abandonment of details in preference for a more indefinable effect of near abstract panoramas. This version of Claude Monet's water lilies was made in 1906 belongs to the second series of 48 canvases that Monet finished 3 years later. This canvas perfectly illustrates the artist's perception in the way he focused solely on the surface of the pond amid the reflection of the sky and trees. Although he returned again and again to the water lilies, it was the subject that caused him difficulties, and he worried about the paintings, often reworking them. In this painting, there are no specific lines that separate the flowers and the water, which gives the painting a blurry look. At the age of 82, Monet discovered that he had cataracts. The deterioration of his eyesight was horrifying to the artist, who wrote, "I realized with terror that I could see nothing with my right eye. A specialist told me that I had a cataract and that the other eye was also slightly affected. It's in vain that they tell me it's not serious, that after the operation I will see as before. I am very disturbed and anxious." In 1923, Monet was operated on 3 times to try to correct his right eye. The brilliant fiery reds and yellows of Water Lily's Japanese bridge are indicative of the impaired sight of the artist, seeing his bridge within a reduced palette. Monet might not have been able to develop the lines because of his troubling cataracts at the time when he was working on these paintings, but the look of these paintings have added a lot of quality and value to this series. Yet, it is the most haunting use of color and light and composition in Water Lily's Japanese bridge, which creates an overall startlingly emotional effect for the viewer. Monet's Water Lily series opened the door to abstract painting, and at the time of Monet's death in 1926, the art world, both in Paris and in America, was a very different place from the one he had basically struggled against during his whole life. Monet and his circle were the first to truly challenge the conventions of Parisian art in the modern age, and by doing so, created a greater understanding of color and light. Towards the end of his life, Monet's work increasingly reflected a form of abstraction through his simplification of composition and reduction of all unessential elements. With his obliquely structured composition and focus on pure vivid color, Monet set a precedent for later artists, particularly those of the post-impressionist, expressionist, and abstract expressionist movement.